the Driven Dental Podcast.
We're here today with Dr. Tim Davidson, and he has been working with us since October of 20, you said?
Yes.
So almost 5 years. He is a partner dentist with us at a location, and I am often asked who is the nicest dentist that we work with, and I don't even have to think about it. It is Dr. Davidson. He's just genuine and nice, and I could tell that from the very first time that we interviewed, and always been super excited to work with him and to see him at a practice. So I'm really glad he is here because he has gone through a lot health-wise, and we can all learn from somebody who's gone through something intense. And I think he has a unique perspective on life and people, which is what our company is focused on. So before we get into the heavy stuff, though, I thought we would just start how did you get into dentistry?
Well, thank you for the compliment. How I got in, I really just did a lot of shadowing. I really, from an early age, didn't know. I wasn't one of those kids that woke up when they were 5 and knew they wanted to be a dentist. I was initially pre-pharmacy going into undergrad, kind of picked that on a whim. I knew it covered a lot of the science courses because I knew I kind of wanted to go into that healthcare direction, but didn't really know exactly where. My neighbor growing up is a dentist, and so he ultimately was like, why don't you come in and shadow me and see what I do day to day? And after all the shadowing I had done with pharmacy as PCPs and then ultimately in dental, that's kind of what sparked my interest. Kind of getting to work with your hands. Every day is different. He's a general dentist, so he sees all sorts of stuff. And I thought that was pretty unique. So that's kind of ultimately what drove me into applying to dental school and kind of deciding that was the path I wanted to take.
What age was this?
So I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah, that would have been like my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
That I figured that out.
And this neighbor, how long were you neighbors with him?
From the time I was 1 until 14, I want to say. Okay. Then they just moved down the road.
Right.
But yeah, still a family friend. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's how you chose dentistry. Then you chose LECOM.
Right.
Okay.
So that followed. I was at University of Florida for undergrad, and then LECOM just following that. So it was 3 years in the Sarasota, Bradenton area. Mm-hmm. And then I spent a year up in Erie, Pennsylvania. That's where their main campus is.
Oh, really?
Yep. And then working, it's like an outreach clinic up there for the underserved. So that was neat. But then quickly realized that I had that Floridian blood and got back to Florida as soon as I graduated.
And what was LECOM like?
It was a good experience. I was in the first graduating class. So there's definitely kind of some bumps in the road. I think when when you're in the first class trying to figure out how are we going to run this school. I will say, I think the pros to it, there were no specialty programs there. So, if I had a molar endo that I wanted to do, they would go ahead and do it.
Oh, that's awesome.
A lot of times I had the endodontist just looking over my shoulder, kind of helping me, give me tips here and there. Same with oral surgery. We got to do some unique things like some tori removal, some just kind of more advanced procedures, obviously under the supervision of this oral surgeon in that case. So that was neat. And, once you kind of met, your criteria of you need to do this many root canals, this many whatever. If somebody I like to do endo. So if somebody didn't want to do it, they would just be like, well, do you want to do it? And I would say, sure. So that's how I guess I gained a little more experience in that field because we didn't have to refer out to a specialty program or to a residency program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was your 4th year in Pennsylvania? That wasn't a residency?
No, that was just considered part of our 4 years of dental school.
Interesting.
I mean, we still had a few lectures here and there, but for the most part, it was all seeing patients.
Mm-hmm. So. Did you know you loved dentistry? How quickly did that happen?
It happened pretty quickly into dental school because I became, I guess when you're an undergrad, you're taking biochemistry and some of this stuff is how is this really going to be applicable? Right. Mm-hmm. But then once I got into dental school, everything you learn is applicable. And I'm like, well, this is going to affect kind of my everyday. So it just kind of garnered a new interest in it. And it just made it more fascinating for me to learn and to really like appreciate and kind of stick that knowledge. So that way it wasn't one of those things where, you learn it for a test and then take the test and then you just lose it all. So,
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So after you graduate then, what did you do?
So I had always planned to actually work with the dentist I grew up next door to. And he wasn't quite ready for me after graduating. He was in the process of building a new office. Just size-wise, it wasn't the right timing for him. So I took a job with a DSO for like 8 months. And then I joined his practice. And then I was with his practice for right at 3 years. Okay.
What was the difference between the two companies?
So there's a big difference. In the DSO initially, I was placed in there with two pretty much brand new assistants. And I was a brand new dentist. So there's a lot of new in that office.
Was this Orlando?
It was.
Okay.
Yep. And it was okay. I mean, we saw a huge variety of patients. It was kind of one of those places where the cost for a crown might be $400 or $500, and you're trying to add in these upgrade fees, and it just wasn't the way that I wanted to practice dentistry. I didn't particularly enjoy it because you're going through dental school and you have all these like great visions, right? This is how it's going to be. It's going to go this, and in that first 8 months, I was kind of like, I don't know about that.
Right.
But then when I joined the private practice, that was more kind of what I was looking for. It was definitely more like patient focused. You spent more time with the patients. The reimbursements were higher. Not that at the time I really didn't even care about that. I cared more about just learning, getting better, becoming more efficient, becoming confident. I think because that's one of the tough things, right out of school is the confidence, right? You spent in dental school, you had a patient and you had 3 hours to do whatever it was you were doing that day. I remember doing a molar endo in dental school, and I saw the patient twice for 2 3-hour appointments. I mean, the thought of doing a root canal for 6 hours is just absolutely nuts. Yeah. But that's how it was. You were learning, right? And so early on, I think just building that confidence was helpful. And then in the private practice sector, I really had the chance to do that. So
was he able to mentor you?
Big time.
Okay.
So that was another huge benefit to that. He had been in practice for, at that time, probably like close to 35 years. So a wealth of knowledge. And, anytime I kind of got into a bind or had a question, or should I do this? Should I refer this? He always had, some insight on that. And so that was extremely helpful. And he was, very proficient with endo as well. And so he was kind of pushing me into do more of this, do more of that. And so that helped. But yeah, very, very skilled dentist and trustworthy. And so I really appreciated the time I had with him.
How long did it take you to feel confident?
I guess that's tough. And it's probably more like procedure based. Because, with like fillings and maybe some more, I guess we would call it maybe more simplistic procedures, didn't take that long because once you kind of start doing a bunch of them, it's like you got a bunch under your belt. Yeah, there's not too many variations. Implants is another kind of end of the spectrum, right? So there's still certain implants that I'm like, I'll probably shy away from that. It's a little bit too narrow for me. The nerve's too close, whatever the situation is. So it kind of varies, but I think probably a couple years really of like full-time practice to kind of really get where you're comfortable in your typical day-to-day as far as the dental goes. Yeah.
So what were the shortcomings then of the private practice you were working with?
For me, it was really just growth. Just like personal growth, financial growth, professional growth, really. Just being exposed to more procedures. There weren't implants being done at that office. Not a ton of oral surgery being done either. And those are things that I really wanted to kind of expand with. So I would say that was pretty much it. I just didn't see long term where I was going to get the growth that I was looking for. So, and that's when I hopped on Indeed and had a FaceTime meeting with Dr. Kelly, and yeah.
Gotcha. Yep. So as far as leadership goes at the practice level, And your mindset of like how you treat your assistants or how you treat your team, how did that progress starting from the DSO where all of you were brand new and then to the private practice and then onto us?
Yeah. Honestly, it probably stayed pretty similar kind of throughout. The biggest thing for me is I know that I can't do my job without any of those other people there. And they all have a special skill set, and that's kind of what makes their position unique. You know, I was talking to some of the assistants just a week or two ago about this, and they weren't treated great in other offices or other past jobs. They were kind of complaining about this dentist or that dentist or whatever. And they, you know, it ultimately came down to like, you can't perform your job unless they're there, right? I mean, if you ask me to do an occlusal filling on number 30 by myself, it's not going to be easy. Whereas with an assistant, they just make it so easy for you. And then looking kind of at the hygienist side of it, like where does all my work come out of? Mostly out of the hygienist chair, right? They've seen the patient, they've, you know, looked at, oh, they've got a broken tooth here, maybe a cavity here. They've already told the patient that. And then that's kind of what I come in and they already know what needs to be done. So it kind of just an appreciation for what they're doing. Yeah. And then especially like on just like the human level. I mean, I work with awesome people. They're fun to be around. They're kind of more like friends than they are even coworkers at times. And I'm just thankful for them and the way that they can help us, you know, continue to grow the practice. So, yeah.
So you came on board with us in 2020.
Yep.
And then in 2018, you said, what were you diagnosed with?
So 2018, I initially had it was kind of showed up a little bit weird. It was kind of a bunch of itching. Like it felt like I was like, I don't know, it was an itch that you couldn't quite get, right? And it was all over. And so I went through like a bunch of doctor's appointments trying to figure this out. Saw the dermatologist, saw the allergist, everybody. Nobody could really narrow it down. So it was May of 2018. I think it was May 5th. I had a CT scan done. And then May 6th, I happened to be driving by the place where I had the scan done. And I was like, well, why don't I pop in and see if my results are ready? I knew something was off because you kind of know your body and this was just weird. And so I popped in and they were like, yeah, it's ready. They just printed it out, handed it to me. And then I walked out and I'm reading this sheet of paper and it says, you know, concern for malignancy. It says there's a mass in left lobe of my lung. And ultimately it ended up being stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it was definitely like shocking because, you know, I was somebody that, you know, I played baseball and basketball I think from the age of 4 through high school, stayed super active in college, intramurals, was always at the gym. I mean, I never thought I would ever have cancer. That just didn't seem like a possibility. And then it kind of hits and you're like shocked. But I think really for me, like the worst part of it was the unknown. Because right when I read that, I'm like, you know, you start thinking like, well, gosh, like how much longer might I live? You know, am I going to have another Christmas or like stuff like that? But ultimately, once I started meeting with my oncologist and kind of coming up with a game plan, that's when things kind of settled down and the nerves kind of, you know, got a little bit of a rest. Because then having a game plan, kind of knowing what you're doing, what you're striving for, kind of helped my mindset and my focus going forward.
So what is Hodgkin's lymphoma exactly?
So it's a blood disease. And so it affects the lymphatic system. And so basically on my scan, like the lymph nodes all through like axillary armpit, all the way across the chest, you know, kind of lit up on the scan. And then there was a mass in the lung. And so that's kind of what labeled it as stage 4 because it had traveled outside the lymphatic system. And then 2, it kind of crossed the midline of the body. Sometimes it can only be isolated to like one node, or it can be just on the right side of the body. But once it crosses and then it moves outside of the lymphatic system, then it kind of gets graded higher.
What's the difference between Hodgkin's and there's other types, correct?
Yeah, there's non-Hodgkin's.
Okay.
And but then there's so many variations within Hodgkin's, and there's B cell T. I mean, there's so many different factors in it.
Okay.
So
as far as like the ones you don't want, what was yours?
Mine was, from what my oncologist said, kind of best case scenario.
Okay.
And so that's ultimately, so I remember the very first time I met with him, well, after I got the sheet of paper that said all this wild stuff.
Yeah. How does that happen?
Well, I have no idea.
How can it be that there's literally a sheet of paper or a chart you read online with no explanation?
Yeah. I mean, you would have thought I would have got a call from like a physician to maybe better explain it so you don't go into, ultimate panic mode.
Yeah.
Which I pretty much did.
Yeah.
And so I brought it home and I had showed my parents, and my mom and my sister were like all over it. And so I think that happened on a Sunday that I got that paper, and I think I saw the oncologist on Tuesday. So they were like real quick with that. Mm-hmm. And then once I met with him, he kind of reviewed the scan. He's like, you know what, this is, unfortunately one of the curable cancers. Like some of them are more treatable. This one here is curable. And so that's going to be the goal. He sent me off for a couple other opinions, and I went and got those. And it was all pretty much the general consensus of what needed to be done. It was going to be 6 months of chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. And it was, I did it every other Friday. So it was a total of 12 infusions, and they lasted about 6 hours. So it was a long time to sit there. Yeah. But I had, and what my oncologist had said was like, the most critical parts of going through this treatment are good support group. Yeah. That being the key, and then try to keep your lifestyle as normal as possible. Mm-hmm. So I knew I was golden on the support group. Like in my family, I never sat through a chemotherapy session without mm-hmm. even a couple people just sitting there with me. And I'm like, you guys can go do something else. You mm-hmm. have to sit here. But they stayed there the whole time. And then fortunately, the infusions at the very beginning, it didn't affect me too much. Like the first one or two, kind of felt like a little lousy the rest of the weekend. But then I would be back to work on Monday.
Really?
Yeah. So I was able to work during it, which I really didn't know if I'd be able to do at first. Mm-hmm. And then the biggest concern was just don't get sick, because my white blood cell count was just about 0. But I think the biggest thing was with the third or fourth infusion, that's when I really kind of started to get sick. Mm-hmm. And I remember at one point I went to work on Monday and I was just kind of getting sick the whole day. Mm-hmm. So that's when following that, I had to take off the Friday and the Monday. So I was able to work at least 2 or 3 days the following week, mm-hmm. but I couldn't, it just kind of became cumulative at that point, and it mm-hmm. was just kind of takes a toll on your body. The wild thing too is what it does just when you're driving there, right? You haven't even gotten the infusion yet.
This anxiety?
I think the anxiety of it, and I think your body's like prepared, and I would honestly get sick right before I would even go in and get it. It's like the body knew what was about to happen. It was just kind of wild. But then, really once Tuesday, Wednesday rolled around after the infusion on Friday, I was pretty much back to normal, eating normally. The big concern obviously is they don't want you to like lose a significant amount of weight. Mm-hmm. Ironically enough, through the 6 months, I gained 11 pounds. I think it's, I just, those 2 or 3 or 4 days that I didn't feel well after, I kind of made up for that eating the week and a half after that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
What other side effects were there? Did you lose your hair?
So I did not.
Okay.
And it was funny because I went to a second opinion at one point and they're like, you still have your hair? And I was like, yeah, I don't know, it's still there. And they're like, well, you're going to lose it. And I was like, kind of my primary oncologist said, you never know, you might hang on to it. And so when they told me I was going to lose it, I kind of had the mindset like, oh, I'm not going to lose it. Like, mm-hmm. I don't know if I have any control over this, but I'm going to, do my best to not lose my hair at this point, because I just didn't like the fact that they were, so quick to say, oh yeah, this is going to happen. You're going to lose your hair, so on and so forth. But held on to it, and it thinned out maybe slightly, but mm-hmm. not noticeable. Yeah.
So you went through 6 treatments of that.
Well, I went through 6 treatments and then they took a scan and everything was clear. Cancer was like completely gone. However, with it being stage 4, I had to, kind of finish off the remaining 6. So I still had to go through further chemotherapy despite my PET scan showing no cancer.
Okay.
But
was that the only treatment you received?
Yes.
Chemo?
Yep. No radiation, thankfully. Okay. So, I mean, there was, from what my oncologist said, another male about my age that was diagnosed at the same time, and he was overseeing his treatment. And he went through so much with getting sick, and he even had a little bit of a relapse, and I think he had to have a bone marrow transplant, all with the same diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So I was extremely fortunate. For whatever reason, my body just responded pretty well to the treatment. Obviously, I think the benefits on my side is I was young, otherwise healthy. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's really what maybe helped me get through that. But yeah, the will of God, it just took over, I guess. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How long does that treatment last? Like 6 or 12 treatments?
Do you mean
is it every other week? You said
it was every other week. So it was 6 months for the
full thing.
For the full thing. Yeah. So I finished, my last infusion was like early November of 2018.
But you got good news in the middle of that?
I did.
3 months? Okay.
That it was working.
Okay.
So, and then once I got that, I was feeling pretty good. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, I can get through this. The last couple infusions, I was kind of like, do I really have to get another one? Because it was starting to take such a toll. Mm-hmm. Kind of the sickness that you'd feel afterwards and the nausea was so extreme. But you get through it. I mean,
so after the initial shock of the diagnosis, mm-hmm. after the shock, what is going on in your mind for those first 3 months?
I guess I felt pretty confident with my oncologist that it was going to work. He was phenomenal through the whole treatment. And I think maybe I picked up a lot of, bedside manner, things like that, chairside manner from him mm-hmm. and from that experience, because he was always so positive throughout it. He's like, if this doesn't work, we have a plan B. That's highly successful. But he's felt confident the entire time. And so I kind of put all my trust in him. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like, I was going to get through it, and prayed about it a lot, and, mm-hmm. and it worked. So
were there waves of emotions? Like if you were more tired maybe, or feeling more sick, were you having a harder time?
There was like a little bit of like brain fog at times, I will say. They kind of call it like chemo brain, and mm-hmm. it's a kind of a real thing. You just kind of like could be doing something like pretty simplistic and kind of like forget, like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But really not too bad. I mean, really once my mindset was, this is my path. This is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to get these infusions every other week. We're going to get this taken care of. The surgeon that actually put in my port that I was going to receive the chemotherapy through, he's like, this is a bump in the road. You're going to be fine. You're going to get through this. It's going to change your perspective on life.
Yeah.
That's going to be the end of it. You're not going to deal with this again. Mm-hmm. And I just had so many people kind of telling me that, mm-hmm. that I felt pretty confident in just moving forward to treatment, and that I was going to get through it and everything was going to be just fine. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I'm one of those people that I'd much rather it be me mm-hmm. than somebody around me, because I really can't handle the anxiety if it's somebody else. At least if it's me, I feel like I have a little bit of control over mm-hmm. it. So honestly, I was just thankful for that.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I knew I could get through it. I knew it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Hard to describe.
Did you find that you actually had to be the support, like say for your mom or a family member? Like you had to show that you were strong for them?
Yeah, at times.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, stop toughing it out. Like, they could kind of see that, I was trying to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think it helped. I think it helped everybody. And I think, just having that positive mindset, and I tried to make sure that was kind of a staple. And again, these are all things that were kind of instilled from my oncologist, as far as, having the positive mindset, the strong core group of people around you, and mm-hmm. just knowing you're going to get through it. And, But yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I can honestly say it wasn't as terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
At the time. It was a little terrifying. Especially those first 2 or 3 days where I just hadn't spoke to anybody about it and didn't have a game plan and didn't really know where I was going.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned a change in perspective. Mm-hmm. What did that look like? The big picture.
Yeah. So that was probably the biggest effect of it all. I mean, prior to that, something might go wrong in your day, I don't know, your root canal failed. I don't know, somebody broke a filling you did, and you're kind of like, oh gosh, you get all frustrated about it. And now looking at it, it's like, gosh, I would have given anything for my tooth to break or me to need a root canal or something that I can kind of get fixed reasonably. And even like stuff outside of the office. Like actually yesterday is a prime example of this. We had someone out to trim some trees. So they came out, trim some trees. They find one of our big oak trees is kind of rotting out inside. They let me know, we got to go ahead and cut that whole thing down. It's going to be X amount of money more. Okay. And then they told my wife, they're like, hey, by the way, it looks like your AC unit outside is frozen over. So then we had an AC guy out and he's like, yeah, some compressor coil needs to go. This is going to cost X amount of dollars. My transmission went out last week. My wife got a new van.
Nice.
So all in a matter of 4 days, all this happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, can things get any worse? And absolutely, things can get way worse. And so now looking at that, I was talking to my dad on the way home, telling him all about this. And he's like, you're healthy. Your kids are healthy.
Yeah.
Your wife's healthy. Don't worry about the rest. And I'm, it's true. Mm-hmm. And so that perspective has been huge. And it's just like, it's cliche. Don't sweat the small stuff. Mm-hmm. But once you kind of go through something like that, like just the perspective change is just wild. Everything's manageable, and you can get through it. It's if it's not life or death, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
how about your level of appreciation for not only getting through the bad times, but all the good things that happen?
Right.
Are you able to appreciate it more? You feel?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And funny enough, when I was going through the chemotherapy, they're like, talking about like family planning and stuff like that in the future, and had a lot of testing done. And they're like, you're probably never going to have kids.
Really? And
so I was like, oh gosh, that's kind of a hard one to swallow. I always wanted to be a dad, I always wanted to, coach a t-ball team. Mm-hmm. So I had let my girlfriend at the time, fiance, and now wife, know all that ahead of time. So, just so like this might not be in the cards for us. She was good with it. And we've been married just over 3 years, and we have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So that's amazing, and that's been like the most fun to see that happen and see that change. And now like to be able to appreciate that much, so much more after having the first kid. We were like, wow, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
Never will happen again. Mm-hmm. And then 14 months later, here comes the second. So, life came at us fast, but, and it's busy, but I couldn't be more thankful.
Yeah. Did you mention that you feel better when you have control over something that's going wrong? Mm-hmm. And I know for me, like I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and what is not in my control for them is the scariest thing. Like, for example, SIDS, I'm sure, sudden infant death syndrome. Like, I couldn't even research that because I just wouldn't let my brain go there. Just the thought of going into the room and seeing that, I literally just couldn't do it. So, knowing that you've gone through something traumatic, though, how are you able to like look at your kids and live through the fear of what might happen to them?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely crosses my mind, on maybe a daily, at least a weekly basis for sure. You kind of see that and you have concern for them. I just put, my faith in God that, he'll take care of them. And, my wife and I would do the very best we can in raising them. But that fear of the unknown is just, it is terrifying. And, from their health to the state of the country to everything else around them, how they could be affected. It's scary for sure.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're just going to do the very best we can to make them as successful and happy as possible.
Right.
Pray for the best on that.
Yeah.
But that's a tough topic for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of something that's not going, like say at work, something's like the crown didn't fit, the root canal didn't work, whatever it is. How long does it take you to transition to like, oh yeah, I have to remember this is small? Like, because when you're in the middle of it, it's awful.
Oh yeah, it's horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long does it take?
It's not instantaneous. I'm not perfect on that. I mean, it bothers me. Sometimes the assistant's like, you seem down. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm down. That didn't go the way I wanted it to. They're like, it's going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And so I get a lot of encouragement from the people in the office, and I'm extremely thankful for that. But it'll usually take me a little bit. But really, once I start talking to the patient, if it's like a crown not fitting, for example, and it's the first time, second time, whatever it is, sometimes you go into those weird cases where it's just like never quite fitting right. I tell the patient, I'm like, look, I'm sorry. This is not going the way we had planned it. I'm going to do this 100 times until we get it right. But I wouldn't put that in my mouth, and I'm not going to put it in your mouth. And even if you wanted me to put it in your mouth, I'm not going to put it in your mouth, because it's just not the way that I can't go to sleep at night if I know that I put something ill-fitting in your mouth or something that's just not my best. And so I think really once I kind of explain it, and a lot of times once I speak to the patient about the situation and they have an understanding of it, and then they're like, yeah, no, I appreciate you're doing that. A lot of times they're thanking me for not doing it. And I'm like, please don't thank me.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times it's just a conversation I have with the patient that really kind of helps me realize that we can get this fixed. This is not the end of the world. There's way worse things going on. There's way worse things that, could be happening right now. And so I guess that like truly puts me at ease.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are there any like mental exercises you do, or let's say you are going through a tough time at home or at work, like that is a reminder of the perspective you now have?
Yeah, I definitely do that. I'll usually just like kind of find a spot that's quiet, and I'm like kind of by myself for a few minutes and just kind of think about that, replay that, think in my head, what game plan can I come up with here? Because ultimately I was all about like having the game plan, right? That was I needed the game plan when I initially was diagnosed. And so then you start thinking, okay, well now I need a game plan. How am I going to fix whatever issue I have going on, whether at work or at home? And then I think once you have that, it's like you have something that you're kind of working towards. I will say, while going through the chemo, having the game plan was the helpful part, and then getting through it. But then afterwards, it's like the chemo stops, and then the mind starts going in other directions. And I still deal with that today. Like, is it going to come back?
Yep.
When's it going to come back? Like, I mentioned earlier, itching was kind of one of my primary symptoms. I get an itch on my foot, and I'm like instantly kind of jump into panic mode.
Yeah.
Well, then I look down and I'm standing in an ant pile. Well, that's like the best news ever, right? At least I have a reason for itching. You know what I mean? And so, unfortunately, the mind's it's a tough game. It never stops going. But I think just, again, back to perspective, I think that's just the biggest thing, just kind of keeping everything perspective. And, I even, I spoke to my oncologist about the anxiety afterwards, like worrying about that.
Yep. And
he said, your chance of getting this are just as good as mine or his or theirs. At this point, you're beyond that marker point. Okay. So you kind of just have to let go on that. And of course it's a lot easier said than done, with a lot of things, but, just trying to kind of keep that in the back of your mind,
Yeah. Do you find that the busier you are with life, the easier it is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I've got a very busy life.
Yeah.
Work's busy and home's busier.
Yeah.
So it's great. A lot of times I say to patients, I'm like, oh, my real job starts at 5:15 when I get in the front door.
For sure.
Because that's when, I got to play basketball and run around and chase somebody and feed somebody. And, my wife's been doing it all day long, which it's a miracle worker to do that. I mean, it's harder than going to work for me.
Yeah.
But she's got it's the best job. You're getting to raise two kids, and what could be better.
Right.
Yeah.
Did your perspective of how you view people at work change before and after this? I mean, I'm sure you've always been a nice guy, but was there a new level of niceness at work?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just like, we're all human, right? We're all going through some tough things. You know, mine happened to be kind of a weird health scare, but everyone's got something they're going through. And so a lot of times it might be quick to, you know, judge like, oh man, why are they kind of rotten today? Or, you know, but you don't know the backstory behind it a lot of times. And so I guess I'm guilty of frequently asking my assistants, are you doing okay? Like on the side. And, you know, I'm not trying to like divulge into their information or anything that way. I just want to make sure that they're good,
right.
Because I really just appreciate them, not from even a work standpoint. Of course I do, but on like a personal level. Like I want to make sure that they're doing okay. And, you know, if they're having a tough time at home or you know, whatever the situation is, you know, try to be someone to listen to, because sometimes that's all somebody needs, you know, is just you know, someone to talk to about it.
Yeah.
Maybe they just don't have someone like that. So, yeah, I guess perspective has definitely changed though on you know, people and appreciation in the office, you know, since going through all that.
Right. Do people at work know you had this?
I think pretty much everybody does.
Okay.
And I'll share it with a patient here and there. You know, especially if I can see that, you know, if they're going through something similar and they might look down about it. And, you know, I start asking questions, you know, did you have a port placed, and just some things we need to know just from a medical standpoint.
Yeah.
And then I'll share my information on that and, you know, kind of talk to them a little bit about it. And I feel like they kind of perk up and brighten up when they hear someone else has been through it, and, you know, the experience that I had, and just really just offering encouragement to them, because that's about all you can really give somebody in that position, right? You know, you're going to get through this. You're going to do well. You know, keep that positive mindset, and you know, it does help, because I had people do that for me.
Yeah,
and it was huge.
Yeah, it's the importance of other people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, at home, at work, everywhere you go. I mean,
yeah,
I'm so blessed and thankful for everybody I work with. I mean, it's like the dream team getting to go to work with them. And so that's another reason I want to make sure everyone's happy, because I tell them, just need you here for another 40 years and then you can call it quits.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But
so what does your treatment look like now? Is it just annual checkups? Or?
Yep. Yeah. Just annual checkups, blood work, things like that. So it's pretty easy. There's no more scans or anything at this point. So that's really about it. I mean, I'm always kind of self-checking lymph nodes, things like that. I don't know if that's ever going to go away.
Sure.
But I think that's just kind of that back of the mind, a little bit of anxiety hanging on, you know, of always worrying, you know, could it come back?
Right.
But
now, do your kids have to get checked as well?
They don't. So it doesn't have any effect that way.
Okay.
Like really, there's no history of cancer in my family. So it was just so weird that I ended up with that. But no, I mean, there wouldn't be any like pre-screens or anything like that for them. So,
and they have no idea why it happened.
No explanation. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can start throwing out guesses.
Yeah.
But nobody truly knows. Yeah. Could just be like a spontaneous mutation that occurred and it just kind of escalated from there. I have no idea.
Yeah. I know this is kind of a person for me. What we're going through right now with the kids is just zero sleep.
Yeah.
This is a selfish question.
Yeah.
In the middle, it's tough. Like last night, for example, Ella was up at 1:30. It took forever to get her back to sleep. My wife had been up with Grayson late, so I wanted to make sure she got enough sleep. Took forever to get her sleep. I got Ella down to sleep. I'm literally walking back to my room, and Grayson starts crying. So it's just round 2.
Yeah.
How when stuff like that is happening, do you struggle with that?
Oh yes.
Okay.
100%.
I assume you're not thinking like about cancer every night, like you're struggling with the kids, but like you're just in general, how do you get through like just
that situation?
The daily grind? Yeah.
Yeah. The sleep is probably the hardest thing. So we moved my son. he turned 2 on Halloween. And so we moved him into his big boy bed. And he doesn't like to go to sleep without somebody there. So my wife and I kind of alternate nights. So, and then my daughter just turned 1, so she's pretty easy. We put her in the crib at like 7:30 or 8, and she'll generally sleep until about like 5:30. But the 2-year-old, he always wants somebody there. And so we run into the same situation where you finally you sneak out of the room and you kind of fairly carefully close the door to make sure he doesn't hear. And then you lay down in bed and you close your eyes for a split second and he walks right in, and it's like, you start all over again. Yeah. But I guess, it's just part of, I think, the stage that we're in. I have people, a few assistants at work that have a little bit older kids, and they're like, it gets easier with the sleep, at least. Yeah. And, at the same token, it's like, I saw a thing the other day. I know a lot of kids watch Bluey. I guess now my social media advertises Bluey to me. And it said basically like, this stage of your life, like you only get one time where you have toys scattered all over the house. You're having these sleepless nights, you're getting up with the kids, but it's going to go back to what was before kids, right? Where you could sleep until 10 and nobody was going to bother you on a Saturday, for example. And you're going to look back and wish that you could go back to where you had toys scattered all over your house and you had those sleepless nights. So I guess I kind of like, it's hard in the moment when it's 3 a.m. and you're exhausted, but, try to keep that in the back of my mind, like, this is just part of it. It's part of what we signed up for. Yeah. It's part of the deal. It's going to be a tough grind for a few years here, but then we got, the next thing to look forward to. And would I change anything? Absolutely not,
For sure.
But I'm with you. Yeah. It's hard.
I'll try to remember that tonight. I know I'll have more chances.
Yeah. I know. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you doing this.
Oh, no.
When my brother was diagnosed with a variation of lymphoma, you were the first person I thought of and called, and you were an amazing support to really our whole family, because we had the same thing where he checked online and it just, I think it just said cancer, like confirmed cancer, like on some report. Right. And so we went through that panic mode, and I had remembered your story. So if you hadn't been so open about it, things could have been a lot worse for us as a family. So I'll always be appreciative of that for you. And
absolutely.
And hopefully this helps people today.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.